to have you with us on the 9 p.m. edition of the Urban Debate. Here's often when big stories and developments take place. We report about it, we highlight it, we even ask questions, we even express our anger, and then we move on. And we sometimes don't look back to ask what happened then. Often, the authorities, the governments, bank on this. They bank on your short-term memory and our short-term memory. They bank that the media will find another issue to highlight, and then they hope that the people, the voters, will forget about it, move on, and get distracted. It is our job that on crucial issues where lessons have to be learned, where investigations have to be done, where punishments have to be given or accountability has to be made, where changes have to be done such that such disasters don't happen again. It is our responsibility to keep going back to those issues and keep asking those questions. And so tonight, I bring you one of those issues. The kind of oxygen shortage that this nation witnessed, the whole world saw take place in India during the peak of the second COVID wave. It was stuff of nightmares, but it was real. It wasn't a figment of your imagination or my imagination. People died because we couldn't get oxygen to them on time to save them. COVID patients died because there wasn't enough oxygen at that point where they were, in that location, in that hospital. But unfortunately, the governments would have us forgotten that. They would hope that we forget, move on, not talk about it, talk about the great milestone of 100 crore vaccination jabs given, but not talk about the lives lost. And so we heard excuses then. We are hearing denial now. We heard governments after government at that point of time indulge in blame game. We are now seeing an attempt to whitewash the truth itself and give us some lame reports to deal with. A 3-member committee appointed by the Goa government has given a clean chit to the government on the oxygen shortage crisis that resulted in 80 deaths in May during the peak of second COVID wave. 75 deaths took place in one Goa medical college in a span of 4 days. On May 11th, 26 people died between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. at this hospital. A day later, 21 patients died again during the wee hours at this hospital. A day later, 15 people died between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. And a day later, on the 4th day, 13 people died. For 4 days, this went on without the government realizing what was going on and finding a solution. When asked by the court, the government came up with another set of excuses. They told the court that they did not have an expert tractor driver who could maneuver the vehicle carrying oxygen cylinders into the small pathway. There was a small pathway leading to the hospitals, that entrance from where the oxygen cylinders had to be taken for refilling. And the government told the court that they didn't have an expert tractor driver to take the tractor in reverse into that lane, and that led to disruption in supply of oxygen. And that led to these deaths. So effectively, back then when the courts asked this question, government's answer was logistical issue. Now, a committee appointed by the same government to look into what happened has come up with a different set of findings and wholly and solely put the blame on the hospital for not raising an alarm when the crisis occurred. This committee, as reports show, has said that nothing unusual was seen in the number of deaths. According to these committee, these people just died because they had COVID. There was nothing unusual about the fact that suddenly a large number of people were dying every night, early morning between 2 and 6 a.m. day after day, and suddenly that trend stopped. For everything else, it's the hospital that has been blamed. At no point is there any accountability for the state whose responsibility it should have been. But that's not just what is happening in Goa. City after city, state after state, it's the same story. Remember how it became a big issue about states telling us how many people in their state have died due to shortage of oxygen? About the government, central government, answering in the parliament that nobody has died due to oxygen shortage because the states haven't given them the data? Well, the states are still not admitting the reality. Chhattisgarh said no update on audit ordered because the centre never asked us for an audit on this. Delhi has said they had formed an audit committee to assess what really went wrong and how to prepare better, but the centre blocked this committee, claiming there was already one in place. So that's the battle between Delhi and the central government going on. In Uttar Pradesh, one of the biggest instances was in an Agra hospital. That hospital was also given a clean chit by the audit panel and the government panel that was set up, and the panel said there was no mock drill, people didn't die due to oxygen shortage. Similar instances have happened elsewhere. In Haryana, a panel was set up to probe negligence by hospitals leading to deaths. No update has happened. It's been forgotten. In Karnataka, High Court panel said 36 patients died due to lack of oxygen in Chamarajnagar. The state said no. State denied the findings, said there was no oxygen shortage. That was not the reason for the deaths. State after state, including states like Telangana, Andhra, Tamil Nadu, where similar instances of shortage of oxygen took place in hospitals, each of these committees or panels turned around and said, no, that was not the case. Effectively, the governments want you to believe that nobody in this country died due to oxygen shortage. Opposition governed states, BJP governed states, it doesn't matter. Everybody wants you to believe that there was no problem in their state, may have been elsewhere. Why are we denying this truth? What are we gaining out of it? I say good evening to Dr. Gulrez Sheikh of the BJP, Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, Chairman of Nephron Clinics, and Tulio D'Souza, spokesperson for the Congress Party, joining me this evening, Ravi Srivastava, political analyst, and our backer with me. Dr. Bagai, I want to start off with you, and this is, I don't want to get into the politics of it, but can we really tell people of our country that nobody in this country died due to oxygen shortage, which was also perhaps a result of bad planning or mismanagement?
Good evening, Tanvi. Good evening, everyone on panel. I think there is no disputing the fact that the pan-India, there was an oxygen crisis. And let me explain on two different fronts. One is the medical front and the second is an ethical front. Just allow me 2 minutes. Now, oxygen deficiency can never be captured as such in any hospital discharge summary because there is no subheading or subvertical which is to be filled in any ICD code 10, which actually demonstrates that you have to write a deficiency of a particular item, be it oxygen, be it ventilator, or indeed a lack of bed. When you talk in terms of oxygen deficiency during the second wave, which was creating havoc, and undoubtedly I can go on record in saying that yes, patients' care suffered because of less oxygen, and indeed few patients died because of less oxygen. The entire dynamics of the bed mix changes in such a catastrophic event. Normally, hospitals have a 20 to 25% mix of ICU beds and the rest are ward beds. What happens in these kind of cases is almost every bed requires oxygen. The flow of oxygen per patient per bed increases, the demand increases. What is more important is a lot of hospitals, especially outside the larger cities and larger corporate hospitals, don't have oxygen plants in-house. Coming to what the ethical question is with regards to patient charter, we are trained for the last 4 decades in healthcare to give standardized healthcare, patient-centric care, clinical excellence, and more important, we have to safeguard patient safety. And I think patient safety is the cornerstone of our practice. The hospitals must have internal audits. I don't worry about the government asking us for audits. It's our self-learning, and it is mandatory by accreditation rules that you have to have an audit. the hospitals must furnish those internal audit records. Now, what happens if a hospital does not furnish it or hasn't done it? Then the hospitals must be pulled up. Coming to an overall scenario, if you have 4 lakh patients, out of which a vast majority require inpatient care and are oxygen dependent, I also want to go on record, no country can suffice to the oxygen needs. Not even US and Florida, Louisiana and Texas could meet the oxygen supply. But could we have been better ready? Yes. Are we much better ready after the second episode? The answer is also yes. Over to you, Tanvi.
Yes, and it is not to say that if anybody admits there was a shortage, we're going to outright just blame them. But to not admit that people died because of oxygen shortage and that well into the peak of it. And we're not even now just talking about what happened in the last week of April in many parts of the country. The instances Dr. Gulrez Sheikh, this particular 4-day period in the example of Goa was in mid-May. By then, the whole country was well aware of what was going on. To say it was only and only that hospital which was at fault and nobody else had to bother, is taking people for a ride. In Goa, that was the only key big COVID hospital. It was the government's duty to also look into what was the status of affairs there. How can we give a clean chit to the state?
Tanvi, I'm fortunate enough to sit on and talk on the Times Network because you guys are having your journalists everywhere in all major places, including Goa, so you can check and verify what I'm saying. The from where the hospital was getting its oxygen, it is situated at just 45 minutes distance from the hospital, number one. Number two, if you look at the number of cases, the number of positive cases in those days versus the number of deaths on those days, you will find that the ratio is almost the same throughout the month. It has not changed. But that time was very unfortunately, it was the peak of COVID, and hence the death numbers were also there like that. And as far as the medical college is concerned, see, any college institution, it has got its own heads. If it is not the case, then let the Home Minister be the SHO of all institutions, or let the Health Minister be the Vice Chancellor of all the medical colleges. It doesn't happen like that. So you have to fix the people who have done something wrong or they have done some fault. And the Association of Resident Doctors of Goa, they have flagged some issues in their letter to the hospital on 1st of May. We think that if the hospital would have given heed to all those issues, then a lot of lives may have been saved. And fortunately, we live in a country which has got judiciary as well. If anybody is having any iota of doubt on this panel's report, they can approach the High Court as well.
Dr. Gulrez Sheikh, I am going to state the facts.
And check the
I am going to state the facts for which you don't even need to go there and check how far away is the oxygen supply place from this hospital. It is a fact that this is the biggest main COVID hospital in all of Goa. So there would be no doubt on the kind of pressure there would be in terms of caseload that would happen on this hospital, because this is the only option that people have over there. Now, on day one, when so many people died between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., should the alarm bells not have gone ringing? On day two, when again so many people died at the same time, in the same time period, should the alarm bells not have gone ringing? For the government to say that we live in the same city, we are responsible only for this key COVID hospital, but it is not our problem because the hospital only didn't tell us or didn't do anything and didn't bother and didn't listen to anyone. Is that really believable to you? Just tell me that much.
There was no shortage of oxygen in the plant. So the issue goes for logistic. And for logistic, if the hospital has told the logistic guys and the plant informed well in time, There should be no issue vis-a-vis logistics as well. And you are talking about being alarmed. Definitely, the whole country was alarmed and still is alarmed. And even if we talk medically, when you change the cylinder for the system, then there is a slight drop in the pressure, but that drop was not sufficient enough that people will die due to it. Unfortunately, these are the things which I don't want to say. The doctor, I'm also a doctor, but this is a fact which is being written in that report. That is the reason I'm calling that anybody having any iota of doubt can go to judiciary, and judiciary can also appoint its own panel. But the thing is that there was no shortage of oxygen. Yeah, logistic can be an issue.
Okay, you say logistics can be an issue. Well, obviously we can't deny that, Mr. D'Souza, because that's what the government told on record to the High Court, that oops, sorry, so many people, 70, 80 people died, but that was a logistical issue because we didn't have a tractor driver.
See, first of all, let me come back to the report, the 35-page report. Now, the government was not at all honest in getting the factual position right. You have a government that orders for an inquiry by a committee of government officials to submit a report to the own government. How independent can this inquiry committee report be? We have the dean of the medical college, we have one revenue secretary, and we have one person who is an engineer from the IIT. Now, the government expects the committee to submit a report which is favorable to them. Now, in their bid to probably do a balancing act, they know the reality, they know the facts, as you have clearly enumerated and enunciated the entire findings and the basic theme of the report. There are serious deficiencies and lacunae that were experienced right through this month of May. And the government's ill-preparedness, the government not being prepared to listen to the medical experts, the own association of resident doctors working in the Goa Medical College had warned the government about the possible impending disaster. And the government not ready to listen is definitely a finger pointing out at the government first. What does this mean? Does it mean that the Goa Medical College and the health department are not departments of the government? Are they some alien departments which the chief minister doesn't hold sway in terms of governance? How can a report like this be tolerated by the people of Goa? Is it an eyewash? We have all the data, we have all the facts. We know that so many people died. We have almost 1,481 people dying in the month of May, and of which 80 cases have been reportedly attributed only to the shortage of oxygen. We have on the 11th of May, 26 people reported died due to shortage of oxygen. So how, when all these figures are well in the clear, showing the government what has been the disaster, you have small issues like the tractor not being able to reverse to the corridor, or any other logistical issues that have been raised. Does the government not have a backup mechanism to save the lives of its own people?
Mm-hmm.
Is it so callous in its attitude towards the basic life as guaranteed by the Constitution of India?
No, Mr. D'Souza, you know, it's not even about having an existing mechanism. Let me be honest here. I don't think anybody here expects any of the governments to already have a mechanism in place for such kind of unprecedented pandemics that hit us. But when it happens, and when the situation becomes that tough and difficult, it's about seeing a reaction from the governments come in. And if there is no reaction, it's about introspecting about it later on and admitting that we could have reacted better, we could have looked into it, we could have found these solutions. This is how we will change it. Dr. Gulraj Sheikh wanted to make a point before I go across to Ravi Srivastava. Yes.
No, I'll just clarify on that.
Yeah,
That
okay.
just a moment. I'll just clarify. That is precisely the point I was trying to make.
Yeah.
That if the government is not ready to see the reality
Right.
and look at the existing difficulties that are presented before it, how will a corrective mechanism ever be put in place to change the grim scenario that presents itself before?
No, you're
before
absolutely
it?
right. But I think barring one or two states, none of the states have admitted that there have been deaths due to oxygen shortage in their country.
There
So
are other
all
serious
governments and
issues.
all political parties are in equal denial of this. Please give me
No, no.
examples of which are the state governments that have actually said, this is what happened, I conducted an audit, this is what I found, this is where the mismanagement took place leading to so many deaths or shortage of oxygen. Yes, meanwhile, Dr. Gulresh Sheikh.
I'll tell you, no, there is one more issue.
One minute, Mr. D'Souza, let me get BJP to respond to what you're saying. Yeah.
Tanvi, what Mr. D'Souza is doing is the hypocrisy and duplicacy on its peak. He's not talking about next door, the state of Maharashtra, ruled by his own party, that is the Congress party. But he is talking about Goa, which has done much better than the neighborhood state of Maharashtra or even Kerala. See the numbers of deaths and put them into ratio as per population. You will find the difference between Maharashtra, Goa, and Kerala. So Goa government has done tremendous job, and I don't think that there is anything foul in this report. This report states what it is true. If the hospital is at fault, the hospital must be brought to books. What do you think? Should the hospital authorities, we should ignore them? And don't you want that they should be brought to the books?
Are the hospital authorities not government departments which are reporting to the minister? That's the first point that I make. It's a government-run hospital and it's a government-run Department of Health operating under the government of Goa. Are they not responsible and are not they reporting to the government?
No, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. That the government of Goa was either they were in their own la land, not communicating with the biggest COVID hospital in the state when we were seeing the peak of the second wave, which is why they today are telling us they didn't know about it because it was all hospital's fault. Hospital never raised an alarm. If an alarm was raised, nothing was done, then the panel should be honest about it. 1 minute, Dr. Gulresh Sheikh. I also need to bring in Ravi Srivastava in this. And Mr. Srivastava, because this isn't just a Goa story. Look at what's happened in Delhi. Delhi saw hospital after hospital come out and talk about a shortage. Today, because of whatever political fights or denial of what the reality is, we don't know. We don't have an exhaustive audit of what happened. Not in Delhi, not in Goa, not in Chhattisgarh, not in Telangana, not in any state.
First of all, Tanvi, right in the beginning, you have said that let's not get into the politics of the whole thing, and let's do a proper analysis, the whole thing. But unfortunately, it has boiled down to the politics only between Congress, BJP, AAP, or any other third party. What I want to tell, and let's talk about a broader picture. The country's entire healthcare infrastructure is in shambles. The fact is, barring some of the five-star hospitals, the moment you boil down to the other government hospitals or government medical college-run hospital, the situation is by and large the same everywhere. The country was not prepared for this kind of unprecedented crisis in the oxygen. The demand went up to 9,000 metric tons, which the country was not able to fulfill. There, the wagons were running from one place to another, and all kind of efforts were being made. But this is a truth that people died due to the lack of oxygen. Whether it was Delhi, whether it was Goa, or whether it was any third state like Karnataka or any other state. It's a truth, and nobody should try to deny it. It's a fact. Like what I want to say, in Delhi, the wagons were coming, but there were no tankers, the cryogenic tankers, to carry the oxygen from the railway yard to the hospital. There were accidents in Nasik where the wall leaked because the wall was not used for ages. There were situations where in Delhi also the accidents have taken place. The logistics which you talk about, that the oxygen tanker could not get into the GMC hospital premises. I mean, no, had there not been any oxygen shortage in past, it was the first time the oxygen shortage was there in 4 days, a span of 2 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the morning. So many lives were lost. So it's a fact, it's a truth that we were not prepared, and I don't know that how much have we improved since then, because this oxygen crisis happened practically everywhere across the country, and the hospitals were not prepared to handle it. That's the truth. And I told you about the incidents in the demand in Delhi. You have seen the demand went up to 900 tons per day, but they were not getting more than 500 or 600 tons unless the chief minister of the state went to the court and got an order that they should be immediately supplied 700 tons of the oxygen immediately. This was the situation. So at least the Delhi chief minister highlighted the whole thing. He shouted on the top of his voice so that he could get the oxygen. But other states, despite, if there was not non-availability,
No, but Mr.
they would have raised an alarm.
But the same Delhi government, while putting the blame on the centre for not allowing their own kind of audit committee, has also gone to the court and said no deaths happened due to lack of oxygen. The same Delhi government's written response in court is that.
And they also looted the oxygen of Haryana.
Sir, please don't use such kind of words that nobody can loot. This is a federal government everywhere, and nobody is into that.
But it's Haryana category stated that, sir.
I'm telling the fact that there were deaths.
No, 1 minute, 1 minute, please. All of this, no point in fighting about 1 minute, please. No point in fighting about what happened back then, Dr. Gulrez Sheikh and Ravi Srivastava. We would know what happened back then if anybody did an honest job of actually carrying out an audit. That's exactly the point. So please don't tell me what ML Khattar said or Arvind Kejriwal said. It doesn't matter to me because you will not tell us after doing an exhaustive investigation as to what happened back then. That's the larger point that I'm making. Yes, Ravi Srivastava, finish your point.
I want to impress upon the fact that such audits should take place everywhere where the suspicious deaths have taken place due to the shortage of oxygen, and by an independent agency. I repeat, this is not the government job to give a clean chit to the government. Nobody trusts it.
Yeah.
It should be purely independent agency, perhaps led by the doctors, led by the engineers. They should find out that what actually happened. The kind of clean chit the Goa government is giving or patting their back that we were prepared and there was no shortage and nothing like that, it's not acceptable. I say the same thing is applicable for Delhi as well. There also analysis should be done. The proper audit should be done. How much oxygen was consumed? There was reports that the oxygen consumed in Delhi was 3 times more than the oxygen consumed by the patients in Bombay. So I think these kind of things need a proper, thorough audit, analysis, and ensure that such things do not reoccur.
Yes, I'm a little short on time. So please allow me to just come in here. And one last comment from Dr. Bagai. 1 minute, please. Outside of the politics, one last comment from Dr. Bagai on why Dr. Bagai. Often people ask us, why do you want to go back to the past? Why do you want to dig the past? Why do you want to, again, finger with the old healed wounds? But would this not be an aspect where we need to understand such that if it ever happens again, we are better prepared and to acknowledge those lives that have been lost because of this issue?
I agree, Tanvi. 2 or 3 very quick points. We can't change the past, but we can definitely learn from it. And I think being in the medical industry for so many decades, we have to learn from our past to make sure that the services which are provided are better year on year, day on day, and to make sure that the same errors are never committed again. The larger point which has to be made is that every hospital must have an internal death audit. It's not only an internal clinical audit, but death audit. Those death audits give us the information of the clinical picture. How much was the patient's lab values demanding what kind of flow of oxygen? A mere discharge summary will never tell us. But having said that, since the second wave is long gone, I know for a fact that we've made huge strides to surplus the oxygen requirement. And God forbid, at any point of time, any next surge comes, we are much better prepared. But my request to all parties concerned, just as a pure, unbiased, neutral medical professional, is that we can only do as much as we can do, and we need all political parties to stand united with us. This pandemic is not over as yet. Long distance to cover. The vaccination drives are going on. Although we are not seeing so much amount of hospitalizations, but the cases are still there in few states. We need solidarity of purpose. We need unison of our vision to fight this over. I'm sure that we will come out of this with the least amount of casualties. God bless India.
Absolutely. And on that note, I'm going to thank all of the panelists who've joined us on this conversation. My apologies, we're completely out of time. But the only reason that we keep highlighting this, because it is important to know the truth, to acknowledge the truth. The surround sound that happens around such big tragedies, horrors, when they are happening, is different. And people will give you 10 versions, people will make torn claims, there will be hundreds of promises that are made of change and learning and whatnot. But when you look back, you actually see that all that has happened is an attempt to whitewash. State government after state government, including opposition-governed governments, have outright said no deaths due to lack of oxygen in our state. Every opposition-governed state will tell you it has happened, and the center is lying, and the center is in denial to say, oh, it didn't happen. But not in our state, in some other state. In state after state, where they have gone into the details of each of these hospital instances and set up panels, each of those panels have either blamed the hospital or simply said people just died of COVID. That had nothing to do with oxygen shortage. No, the hospital was not to be blamed. No, the state government was not to be blamed. There was no crisis. We didn't even do a mock drill. In some cases, they said people didn't even die. It was just life as usual. Nothing irregular about the deaths that took place. How much will we try to whitewash the truth? And for what purpose? Thank you for joining us on this conversation.